Welcome to the very first in the Lean Back series. This is Kelly Sullivan Walden, and I'm joined by my partner, Wendy Capland. Hey, Wendy.
Okay.
And we started Lean Back, this conversation about a year ago. We've been having this wonderful conversation about what does this mean, and it's now turning into a book. It's a workshop, and we're in this deep exploration, and we thought we would host an interview series with women that we think really are nailing it, like the poster children for what we are trying to express with Lean Back. And if you don't know who I am, I'm Dr. Dream. That's my website is kellysullivanwalden.com. I'm a dream expert. I write books on dreams, and mostly I'm excited about how dreams can help us do a lot of the heavy lifting so that we can spend more time leaned back. And Wendy, I'm going to be asking you all kinds of questions about what lean back means to you. But beforehand, in case somebody's watching or listening to this and they don't know who you are, tell them a little bit of the scoop of who the magnificent you is.
Well, thank you, ma'am. So I'm Wendy Capland, and I'm CEO of a leadership development company called Vision Quest Consulting. And I am in the leadership development for top talent space. I've been doing that for about 30 years and have a very special passion around professional women's leadership development. And Kelly and I have been working together doing programs for women for the last 5 years, I think.
I think it might be 6, but for sure 5.
Yeah.
My, how time flies.
Yes.
And I just think it's an interesting context. Like it's about women's empowerment. And you might notice by the name Lean Back, it's in reference in some ways to the very popular movement and book Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. And we both love her. We love her work and we love her book. And we found, at least this is what happened last year at the Women's Leadership Workshop and then the Shiro Workshop, there was this ongoing conversation that started because I saw Wendy get ready to lead. And she was like, I'm just going to take a big, deep breath. And she paused before she started talking, and she literally leaned back in her chair, and she just looked so royal. And I went, she's leaning back. And I went, ding, 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 ding. This is something. Leaning back and then speaking from a leaned back place. And then throughout the Shiro workshop, and Shiro is all about women becoming the female heroes in their lives, very much about dun dun dun, take on the world, you can do it. I felt like at some point we got to a place where, wait a minute, we don't want our women, we don't want to send the message that you have to keep doing more and pushing more when, wait a minute, what if you're perfect? What if what's the next step, the next horizon is about doing things differently, working smarter, not harder, and maximizing your energy. So we just got really hooked on this conversation about lean back. And Wendy, to me, you were the poster child last year, and I can still so vividly see the power that you emanated as you sat back. And it didn't mean that you leaned back and then checked out and began to snore and drool and go off. You leaned back. And then what came out of your mouth was articulate and powerful. And it seemed like it had the E.F. Hutton effect. If anyone's watching or listening and they remember that commercial from way back when E.F. Hutton speaks, everyone listens. It's like you could hear a pin drop. So it was powerful. And I thought there's something here. So let's talk a little bit. I'm just going to ask you first, just to get this started off on the right foot. And for clarity's sake, what does lean back mean to you?
Remembering that my frame of reference is really the corporate world, and that in that world, remembering that my context is the corporate world, and that what that world cares about and focuses on is productivity and results and measuring outcomes and goals and strategic business initiatives, and that everything we do, we're either considered successful or we're not, depending on how and what we deliver. And so, having said that, that colors the way that I think about lean back in terms of always asking myself the question, how can I be my best self? How can I deliver the best results? How can I be the best version, the most powerful version of myself? And how to do that without killing myself? How to do that without getting sick? How to do that without paying a price? How to do that and not feel I'm on the hamster wheel every single day, like all of my clients do, with no space to breathe. That way of working does not work for anybody. And so lean back for me means it's really an active way of being, even though when we were just talking, Kel, and you were, sort of leaning back in your chair. And for me, it's active, and it's a methodology, speaking sort of corporate lingo, and a way of getting stuff done that has a different mode to it, a different way of being, the opposite of driving, and still getting this. The question is, how do you lean back and still get everything you want and the results that you need to deliver on? And I have spent the last 2 years experimenting myself with that and know that is totally possible. So that's what the definition means to me, and where we're headed in our book, in our workshop, in our work together. So
beautifully said, beautifully expressed.
And now let me ask you the question.
Okay.
What does the term lean back mean for you?
So funny you should ask. I was just thinking about this. I think I'm just gonna come right out and be airy fairy for a moment, and I hope that doesn't offend anybody. But it is, to me, it's about remembering that I'm not the CEO of the universe, that something higher, better, smarter, a love intelligence is governing the universe. And I am a part of it. I'm connected to it. And I do better when I've taken a moment to make sure that I'm fastened to that, and that I'm taking I like the word for God is good, orderly direction. When I think I'm God, when I think I'm the CEO of the universe, I'm a stress case, and I tend to run over people. I tend to do things that end up making more work for myself. Or I can produce, I can create things, but in some cases I have to spend a lot of time undoing those things. And it just seems like if I take a beat, if I take a moment, if I take some time in the morning to lean back, to do some journaling, to do some meditating, to do some connecting with God, connecting with the fact that I'm loved and that love is my essence and that I'm really already there. I love that. There's a saying, I'm going to sound like a Bible thumper. I'm really not. I love the Bible, but I love the saying that you can't add 1 cubit to your stature. Every time I think about that, it does something to me. It's like, oh, wait, I'm already there. I'm already whole and complete. What if what I produce and create comes from the overflow as opposed to compensating for a deep, endless lack, like filling up a bucket that's got a big hole in it? What if the bucket's already full and everything is in overflow, in excess, in generosity, in expansion? So to me, that's what lean back is about. It's not about checking out, going to sleep at the wheel and forgetting everything, but it does feel like it's about bringing in femininity, bringing in spirituality, and still being productive. At the end of the day, I still want to have something to show for my work, for what I've done, for my creative efforts. I want to have something tangible. And And yet I want that. I want the means and the ends to be one and the same. And that's the basic essence. And I guess the last thing I'll say on this is it ties back into dreams to some degree, because I've found that dream work is something that I've dedicated a lot of my professional life to. And I don't do it just because of the mental stimulation and because of the woo woo. I am somebody who is into the woo woo, but I'm also into the nitty gritty, the airy fairy and the nitty gritty. I like to call it airy gritty. I feel like when I dream and I remember a dream, it gives me an edge. It gives me insight. It can save me time. It can make me more productive. And I don't have to run around so hard. So I like to think that dreams can help us do the heavy lifting so that there can be more room, more bandwidth to enjoy this beautiful life we have instead of frittering it as a stress case away. So that's my thought on the subject.
That's good.
In some way, I feel like we both sort of answered this question about, but let's just go here for a minute. What's your relationship, Wendy Capland, to drive, strive mode? Or what has it been in the past and what is it still?
Yeah, so I was born to be productive and get results. When I was a little girl, as a teenager, my dad, I don't know why, but on the weekends when I wasn't working, my parents did not wake me up. And one morning, my dad slipped a note under my door, which was closed, and said, "How productive are you being while you're asleep?" And what I interpreted that to mean was, it's really not okay to rest, sleep, and you should be doing stuff so that you can call yourself productive. And so ever since that time, I learned that in order to make my dad happy, and maybe he was the word of the world, the outside world, that I should be productive and I should work hard. You know, it's the Puritan work ethic that also is part of my DNA, especially, sorry, this microphone's making me crazy, because I live in the Northeast and we are, I'll just say as a culture, we're workaholics here as a common way of operating. And so my relationship to drive, strive happened very early with my dad starting me on this journey of working. The harder you work, the more you'll make, the better the results you'll get, the more you'll be acknowledged, rewarded, promoted, you name it. So I thought that was the way. And I know I'm not alone, but what I've learned is you can only work like that as a human being for so long before it takes its toll on you. And how that shows up for people is different. So as a result of working myself to drive, strive way of being, I've gotten sick. I've gotten diseased, I've gotten divorced. Now, was it strictly that? Probably not, but I think it was a big piece. So I'm not willing to work like that anymore personally. And all of my executive coaching clients, can you sustain it? No, no one can sustain it.
Say that one more time. The recording accidentally got paused. So when you ask people how they're doing, they say,
when you say, "How are you doing?" people say, "I'm busy. I'm so busy." And what they mean is, I can't breathe. I don't have a breath. I go from meeting to meeting. I have no time to think. I have no time to plan. I have little time for myself. And I can hardly breathe. That's what they really mean. Oof. Not good for any of us. No. And it's not sustainable.
Right. Wow, it's interesting. You and I have shared many, many conversations, and I learn more about you every time. I don't know that I really knew that part about your your childhood and with your father. I also have a dad that I love very, very much, and my dad kind of taught me both ends of the scale. He would teach me he's one of his favorite sayings was, "The hurrier you go, the behind you get." As I would get all scurriocious and running around, but he would also, I felt like he would catch me being lazy. And the word lazy was, felt like such a filthy word, like something that I never wanted to get caught doing. It didn't mean I didn't want to be lazy. It just meant I didn't want to get caught being lazy. So I had to find ways to be busy. And I did. I mean, I remember my sister has this memory too. I was playing softball. My dad was one of my softball coaches, and I, there's like literally two of me. There's the me that is like a warrior that would play really hard, and then there was the me that was out in right field catching butterflies.
Butterflies, I knew it. Yeah.
And of course, the ball got hit right to me, and I didn't see it. It landed, and my dad was so mortified.
Mm.
And I got an earful on the way home, and that was it. It really shamed me. I felt ashamed of spacing out and dreaming in public. So I know, like, by the time I got into high school, all the way through high school, I was involved in my mornings until late at night were booked up every day. People used to say, "Oh my God, Kelly, when do you sleep?" I'd say, "Never. I don't need to sleep. I'll sleep when I die." So theater and cheerleading and every club imaginable. And in order to be in all those clubs, I had to get decent grades. So it was hard for me, but I got a B+ average. I was never an A+ student, but that was the beginning. That set me off on this trajectory. And it was definitely like a wanting to please daddy. And I think a lot of us girls want to please daddy. And that's part of the role. I think our moms are typically archetypally here to just give us unconditional love. We can do no wrong. We're perfect as we are. And our dads archetypally are here to push us and show us that it's not unconditional love. We'll love you when you do something that's lovable. And I'm not upset about that. I don't feel victimized by that, but it's interesting to notice where that comes from, and to notice that that it's hard to turn it off. Once that switch has been turned on, it's hard to turn off. It takes some deliberate action. So I think that's what we're doing. So let's switch gears. Let's go from one extreme to the next. Let's talk about leaned back moments. What's your relationship to leaned back, and have you had a moment like that that demonstrates how it worked for you, how it was successful for you to lean back?
What's really curious for me is even until recently, I thought when I am slower, more thoughtful, I have a saying, source from within, execute outside. So source from within, then execute. So the source from within for me means connecting to my intuition, listening deeply to what's next and where I should go and which direction I can head. Notice how I feel about what I'm doing and whether it's in order to determine if I'm on the right path and I'm doing the right thing. So often now I sleep on things before I push the send button or whatever. So up until recently, I thought that while I'm doing this pause, this slower, instead of ready, fire, aim, which is my mode, because let's just get it out the door.
Right.
And if I have to clean up, it's the whole software industry works this way. Ready, fire, aim. If we'll deliver the product, and if we have to clean up, a few bugs, we'll do that after the fact. So I grew up in the software world, so that's a model. just get it out the door. And I have thought that this pausing, this little bit of a slower, let me check in, let me just slow myself down so I can hear my inner voice, meant I wasn't doing anything. And so it's taken me, it's a practice. We say in my business that leadership is a practice. And so what are you practicing? So for quite some time now, I've been practicing slowing myself down so I make better decisions. And so that I don't have to retrace my steps, and I don't have to go and clean up a mess and or completely change direction because I've screwed it up. So that's generically, it turned out that way with my book. In order to get myself to write my book, first of all, I declared I wasn't writing a book. And even when I was writing, people would say, "Oh, you're writing a book." I go, no, I'm not writing a book. And yet I was writing. So the only way it worked for me is to declare I wasn't writing, because that seemed too committal. And I spent 2 hours every morning consistently being by myself with my computer, sitting outside in nature, because I did it during the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I wondered who was doing the writing. It was really sourced from within. That was a very leaned back activity for me. It was writing, and still is. As I listen to it's not my mind that leads me, it's my heart that leads me. And that's my bellwether, my mode of how I move into a lean back way of being.
Mm. It feels so delicious when you say it. I'm imagining what cynics would say, about this, because Sheryl Sandberg and the leaned in movement is so important. The Me Too movement, it's so important. And you and I wouldn't be where we are were it not for these great strides that these wonderful women have made. And we're not talking about going back and being barefoot and pregnant only and losing our power and losing all that momentum. That's not it at all. It's about taking it to the next level and making it so it's sustainable, so that our batteries can recharge. I was telling Wendy, you and I were talking, I was talking about my hybrid car and how I can drive. If I drive in a certain way, I can see that I'm not using any fuel and I'm still going somewhere. But if I go too fast, then I start to dip into using the fuel, using my resources, which are limited, and I can still get to where I want to. I can get there fine. But if I can find that sweet spot where I'm in motion and yet I'm not using anything, I'm not depleting any resources, I'm actually in some way building more resources, I'm building the battery. That's amazing. I know from the nonprofit work that I do with Chime In, I work with youth ambassadors and around the world, and our youth ambassador from Colombia lives on a sustainable farm, and it's really stunning. They talk about how the goal isn't to be sustainable, it's about renewing. The term is regeneration. So Janila says that why would we want to sustain something that actually isn't working? It's about regenerating energy. So I think in our leaned back state, we can tap into a source that would have, it's kind of like the fountain of youth is within us. And I feel like leaning back in this whole conversation is helping us to tap into that and explore what's possible in that realm. But let's go into, from one perspective, becoming the most empowered version of ourselves. If that's at the top of the mountain, there's many ways to get there. I think the leaned back movement is one way. The leaned in movement is also another way. But I think one way might be for alpha women. By the time you get to the top of the mountain, you're exhausted and you can't even look out and enjoy the view. You're just like ready to take on the next challenge. The top of one mountain's the bottom of the next. What does empowerment mean to you? What's your most empowered self? What would that be like?
As you were talking just a few minutes ago, what I was reminded of is that leaning back does not mean you're not heading towards what you want. It does not mean you don't know what you want. It does not mean you don't have goals that you're heading towards and that you will accomplish. It's a way of getting there. And what I think is the magic secret sauce is integration, is both. It's and that there are times for all of us where we need to lean in and get something done in a way that's very structured and logical and linear and kicking it. And then there are times when we need to replenish ourselves. And then there's the integration of how you kick butt and breathe at the same time. And that's another way of expressing that is the integration of the masculine and the feminine. So I no longer think there's just that the way to get anywhere is by one mode, whether it's alpha mode or whatever. I think the best way and the healthiest way and to become my best self or our best selves is to have both and, not one or the other, not use one to get to top of some mountain, that to get to the top of whatever your mountain is or become your most expressed or most powerful self or your best self or using your fullest potential every day. The way to do that is to be able to know when to lean in and know when to lean back. And the reason we are so focused on this lean back conversation is because so many people do not know how to lean back. It's not a practice that they have. And so we're raising it. But where we're headed is how to integrate both. You can't do that if you don't know what the other one is and how to do it.
Amen. A woman, a shiro. I think when I envision what's at the top of the mountain for me, my most empowered self, and in fact, this kind of begins to answer the next and last question as we wrap this up about takeaways, about tools. How can we, if we're stuck in drive strive mode, how do we get into lean back mode? If we are stuck in lean in, how do we shift and get into that more of the flow? I know one of the things for me is to envision my most empowered self, is to take a moment and breathe and say, okay, what's the point? What am I trying to be? What's the goal? And the goal might be a tangible goal, but there's also a personal goal. Who do I want to be in the process? And at the top of the mountain, I envision myself feeling very connected spiritually, feeling connected to God and feeling that higher power, that divine energy is moving through me. And it's moving through my cells, my atoms, it's shining through my eyes, and it moves me. It's like that old American Express commercial, don't leave home without it. It's like I'm not moving without it. It's moving me. It's speaking when spoken through, moving when moved. To me, I feel like that's when things are magical. That's when great things happen. And that's when my dog Lola says, amen to that. She is seriously moved to be a part of this conversation. So, but what's a takeaway for you? What's one of the things that you do to get into lean back mode if you feel like you're leaning in too far?
Yeah, so there are two questions I ask myself. One is, why am I doing what I'm doing in this moment? Because the why underneath it is my deepest purpose, my calling. And then the second part of that question is, what matters most to me? And those two questions help me connect to what's the most important thing, which helps me just slow down a little bit, take a breath, and get conscious around something that seems an unconscious way that I'm working and operating. So those are two tools that work for me. And in the coaching world, in part of my day-to-day work with clients, we ask ourselves the question, does this feel heavy or light when you're trying to make a decision? And so that's another leaned back tool. So if it feels too heavy, it's too much push, or you're in the wrong direction.
That's so good. And there's more where this came from.
Yes,
And I know the rest of this series will be chock full of inspiration and insight and practical tools to help us not just stay in lean back mode, but to access our highest, our best selves so that we can enjoy our journey while making a difference and being all that we came here to be and then some. So thank you for being my partner in this exploration, Wendy Capland.
Thank you back, Kelly
For
Sullivan Walden.
more from Wendy Capland, go to wendycapland.com or visionquestconsulting.com. And Wendy's book is Your Next Bold Move. And you can find out more. Go ahead.
I was going to say, go ahead and give your website too.
KellySullivanWalden.com or IHadTheStrangestDream.com. And until we meet again, just lean on back.